Hey, hello everyone and welcome to Extreme Graphics Tech. My name is Angelo and it's been a while since my last video. But I make videos when I think I have something to say or something I want to share, or some new game is coming out and I want to make a video about it. So that's the nature of my channel. However, today I wanted to talk about something that is quite interesting to me. It is about these two GPUs that you see here. By the way, they are very different in size. This one is quite big and this one is quite small. However, they are more similar than you think. And it happens that these two GPUs, this one is the RTX 2060, 6GB, and this is the RX 5700, okay? So why I want to talk about these two particular GPUs today? Well, you may have guessed from the thumbnail and title of the video, but it's more depth than that. It's just not as shallow as the title may be. These two GPUs were both released in 2019. The RTX 2060 was in January 2019, and the RX 5700 in July 2019. They were launched at the same price, $350. However, they are sort of different. To begin with, the RX 5700 comes with 8GB of VRAM, and at launch it was around 10 to 15% faster in some titles in general, let's just say, than the RTX 2060. The RX 2060 was $350 too, and was the first RTX card, so the first series of GPUs from NVIDIA that supported ray tracing, mesh shader, and DLSS, but only had 6GB of VRAM. One thing I always hear about is how AMD gets better with times and how it ages like good wine and so on. So I wanted to test how much of this is true, especially because I've been an advocate about the fact that testing GPUs nowadays, it doesn't work anymore, at least from my point of view. Just putting two games on two GPUs and just saying these two GPUs, one is 100 frames per second and the other one is 80 frames per second, so buy the one that is 100 frames per second. Think if they both cost the same and they were exactly the same GPUs in terms of VRAM and so on, it's not as simple. My reasoning behind this is because I think the time of pixel counting is over. Now it's more about perceptual quality than raw pixel quality. Okay, so what I mean with that is, for example, I don't think anyone, I have proven this channel that DLSS is better than FSR. Okay, it is the nature of the beast. DLSS is much better than FSR in any or 99% of situation. It has to be a very bad implementation of DLSS to say that it's worse than FSR, okay? So if you have two games, right, and you can use DLSS on one, even if your GPU is lower, you can be more aggressive with the DLSS and keep a very good image quality. For example, you can use DLSS balance on a 1080p and I still have very decent image, while if you do FSR balance, it's not as good because FSR is not as good at reconstructing as DLSS. So yeah, that difference that exists between the two can be alleviated by being more aggressive with DLSS. Just to give you an example, I'm not saying this is the only reason. But of course, these two GPUs cost the same and they have difference. For example, the VRAM is different, and so how would they affect? So the question here is which one age better? But by age better, then I was thinking, how do you actually test which one age better? Because it's, if I'm going just to put two games and just test exactly the same settings and everything, from my point of view, I am being unfair. To begin with, the RX 5700 was already faster when it came out, so obviously it has to still be faster. Okay, that's the first thing. But second, what about DLSS, FSR, ray tracing, and many other technologies? I'm not going to take them into account because when I pay for a product, I'm paying for everything the product can do. So I'm paying an RTX 2060 price because I want DLSS or I want ray tracing, right? Which the RX 5700 doesn't even have ray tracing support, doesn't have mesh shader support, doesn't have VRS hardware support. So there is a lot of features missing from the RX 5700. However, the 5700s have 8 gigabytes of VRAM. So it will be fair to not use those extra 2 gigabytes of VRAM just to compare with the 2060. No, I think each card has their own benefits and their own problems, right? So we have to test in a different way. So the way I try to test is finding that middle point where I think the game looks good, okay, and runs around 60 FPS, but it may not be the same configuration for both. So in some games you may go one way or another. So that's the point that I'm going to try to make in this video with the test we're going to see, and then I'm going to come with my conclusions, okay? So let's go and watch the test before I say what I need to say. Okay, so I'm going to start this test with Forspoken. I know it's a game that not many people like, but I think it's a good game, and besides that, I think the performance has improved a lot over time. In any case, you can see here that I'm using 1080p FSR balance mode with the high preset, and the game is running around 60 FPS in this area. It can go up or down, but that's sort of the middle point, middle ground where things are going. And it behaves quite good. Of course, I could have used a more aggressive band FSR or lower settings, but I'm trying, to push over the cards just to see how much they both can do in terms of performance in demanding games. So it's quite good, I'll say. It behaves honestly very good. But then we come to the RTX 2060. As we know, that RTX 2060 is slower than the RX 5700. However, we can get the same or a little bit better performance by being more aggressive with the DLSS, because DLSS provides better image quality. So in this case, we can go up to DLSS performance, keep the same, and not just that, but also, for example, activate ray tracing ambient occlusion in this case. So we have that extra feature that allows us to have maybe, I wouldn't say big graphical improvement, but it's an improvement nonetheless. It gives you better AO, which is one of the problems this game has. So that you see, you can have even better graphics with an RTX 2060. So when we go to Dying Light 2, the game is running absolutely beautiful on the RX 5700 at 1440p with FSR in quality and the high quality preset, which is the higher preset you can use on this card, because this card, as you know, doesn't accept ray tracing. And you can see the game is running fantastic, over 60 FPS all the times, mostly around 70 FPS. So it's quite a good experience. There is nothing to complain about the performance of this case of this game on the RX 5700. So if you have this car, you can still play games very good. However, the thing is that when we go to the RTX 2060, then we can use the same. We are using the same 1440p, but in this case we're being a little bit more aggressive with the DLSS, or well, the same, but the difference is that we can have the RT preset in this case, which is the ray tracing preset. However, the performance, of course, is not as good as it was on the RX 5700, because of course that one is not using ray tracing. However, this is an option you have here, and you are sacrificing some performance, which I don't think is too bad, to have better graphical quality in general. So that's not quite a small achievement from my point of view, all things considered. However, if we want to just test without ray tracing just to see how the two compare, well, we can get to 1440p using DLSS balance, once again being a little more aggressive with the DLSS instead of using the quality preset that is the one we use in the FSR for the other, but still getting almost or basically the same image quality, and we have around, if not better performance than the RX 5700s. And this is the point I'm trying to make here, not that one is better than the other, but that you can use the features that they provide to push for same sort of quality and performance, because you use what each card is capable of. In this case, well, you use DLSS for RTX. Then when it comes to Returnal, you can see here, I think after recording the game, that maybe I was a little bit too aggressive with the RX 5700. In here, using the Epic preset, as you can see, the game doesn't sustain 60 FPS and is running at 1440p FSR quality, which looks quite good. And sometimes in some areas it can go up to 70 FPS, but in general doesn't keep that. So I think I should have lower the quality of the game maybe to the high preset. However, this shows you sort of kind of the performance that you can get out of this car in this game using the higher possible preset. I may have used a more aggressive FSR or lower resolution. In any case, when we go to RTX 2060, and this is the reason I say I should have used a lower, it's because when I was trying to get sort of the same performance, I had to lower to high preset because the RX is much faster in the Epic preset than the RTX 2060. However, by using DLSS balance too, because I'm being a little bit more aggressive again with the reconstruction, I can activate the RT shadows in this case to have that extra oomph. Unfortunately, the reflections are too much for this, unless maybe I was trying to play at 1080p, which to be honest I think is the target resolution that this car should aim to today. But well, you know, I was being a little bit too aggressive, just trying to push the performance of these cars. Now when we try, for example, Hogwarts Legacy, this is a game that has improved a lot in performance since launch, and now I can say that 1440p FSR quality, we can play a high preset here and play well above 60 FPS. However, there are points where you can get a little under 55 FPS while flying on certain areas, but in general you get a very smooth and 60 FPS experience, which is quite good. However, the behavior of the game is a little bit weird because there are areas where the same area performs better on AMD than NVIDIA, and other areas where it performs better on NVIDIA than AMD. So there is that, right? However, as usual, now we are going to be testing with the RTX 2060. In this case, you can see that we start sort of with the same performance, and then it goes a little bit lower, but it keeps kind of the same sort of behavior frame rate. You know, you can see here we have some drops to 55, and then we go up to 70 again. So in the same sort of area they behave quite similar. The difference here is that I'm using once again RT shadows, low RT shadows, and I'm being more aggressive once again with the DLSS, and the reason for that is to equal the same performance as the RX 5700, but having that extra oomph in graphics. In that sense, it's activating the RT shadows that many will say, well, you can't really see it, but it's always there. Now here instead is where things go the other way around. As you can see here, I'm using 1440p FSR balance with the high preset, and we are not exactly at 60 FPS, but we are very close on the RX 5700 with The Last of Us Part 1. You know, this game is not the most optimized game, it has improved, but well, but still, we have a very nice experience with this, you know, much better than in many consoles even. However, as you can see here, the game is running quite good on the high preset with FSR balance, no problems whatsoever, and I'd say it's doing very good. But where I'm saying that the game shows the other side of the coin is because with the RTX 2060 I have to lower the quality to medium preset, no matter what DLSS I use. I could have been more aggressive with the DLSS, but I still will not get to 60 FPS, and that's because those 2 extra gigs of VRAM on the RX 5700, they do affect performance on this game by a lot. So if I put high preset with the RTX 2060, I won't be able to get the same performance at the RX 57 because those 2 gigs of extra VRAM does affect it a lot. So the only way to get good, if you see, using the same FSR, DLSS preset balance, I had to lower to medium preset. Now another game that I like to test is the SpiderMan Miles Morales, and in this case with the RX 5700 was very easy, just 1440p native, very high preset, and mostly it's a 60 FPS experience. Yes, I'm getting a little bit under and so on. We can tweak it and get that perfect 60 FPS. However, it's very hard to get perfect 60 FPS with this game unless you are like 80 or 90 FPS all the time above, because the problem with this game is that it's very variable. However, in any case, the point here, as you can see, is that we can go up to 80 FPS, 100 FPS, but it's easy. You just put 1440p native very high preset. You don't need to use dynamic resolution scaling or any scaler or anything, and the game will just run fantastic. However, when we go to RTX 2060, things have to change, because instead of using native, I have to use 1440p balance with DLSS, which is quite an aggressive DLSS. However, the reason for this in this case is because I want to use the RT reflections, which I think give a lot to this game, considering that the setting is in the New York City and there is a lot of window and reflective material. So we have to lower instead of very high to high preset, and lower to DLSS balance to have those high RT reflections. From my point of view, give a lot to the graphical essence of the game. So I think it's a very good trade-off for this game in particular. So there you go. I think it's a very good compromise. However, if you don't want to RT and want better frame rate, you can use DLSS quality on the very high preset, and we have sort of the same performance as the RX 5700. So once again, as I've been saying, the thing is that yes, the RX 5700 is no doubt faster when it comes to raster, but that's it. You don't have the options that you can have to with the RTX 2060, which is to decide to lower some other settings, to have ray tracing, for example, or to you can use DLSS to get the performance that you are losing on the other side. Of course, you can use FSR on the RX 5700, so you can get even more performance, but because our target is around 60 FPS in this case, that's what you need to do. So you see how direct comparisons are not really, from my point of view, a good measure of how a GPU will behave. And that's another example is here in Resident Evil 4 Remake, which we can get 60 FPS by using 1440p native and using the prioritized graphics preset. And here you can see that the game is running at almost 60 FPS. It has dips here and there, especially when there is explosion or any other things, but sort of it's quite good. It's quite playable, no problems whatsoever. We can lower the resolution, use FSR or other options, but here we are and it's running quite good. And yeah, that thing exploded in my face. Anyway, I will call this very, very playable. So when it comes to the RTX 2060, then it's when I use FSR quality instead of native, but by doing that, I was able to up the quality of the game to use RT preset. And I think that's important because the reflections in this game when using a screen space are very, very bad. So you can trade a little bit of image clarity for more or better reflections in the game. So that's one of the things that it's important when you're buying a GPU to have the options and to think, well, yeah, I do care about having maybe those RT reflections on games or having some RT. And of course, I'm using the lower denominator here. But if we had something like the 2070 Super or 2070, then we could have, instead of like shadows, reflections on, for example. Starfield is another game that, well, this doesn't have anything particular. It's the latest patch that supports officially DLSS. So we are testing here with the RX 5700 using FSR with the medium preset, and it automatically sets the FSR at 50%. Right? Yeah, you can get 60 FPS in this area. I don't think this is the more demanding graphically, but as a comparison, it's good enough. There are other areas that are much less demanding, so you can get more frames, like 80 or 90. But yeah, I think this moves quite good, no problems, 1440p, and the game looks quite good. As you know, this game is not very NVIDIA friendly. It has improved a lot in the latest patch, but still. However, even to get the same performance that we got on Starfield on the RX 5700, I had to get DLSS Ultra performance, which I don't know what resolution scaling that is in this particular game, because the FSR scaling or the scaling only get to 50%, and when you activate ultra performance, it's grayed out. So I don't know how low it is to get the same performance. However, what I can say is that from my point of view, I was very surprised to see how good it still looks at DLSS ultra performance. Of course, it's never going to be the same as native, but I was expecting to have worse quality, to be honest. I was quite surprised by this. Cyberpunk then is another story, or a different story, because when you see this game, it's 1440p FSR balance, medium preset, RX 5700, around 60 FPS, 60 to 70, running very good, very nice. no problem. And this is a game that manages memory very good. Haven't found, you know, many issues with the VRAM or anything on this game, and it's running at a quite good quality on the RX 5700, as you can see here. This is a game that runs like this, basically on consoles at 30 FPS if you want any sort of ray tracing. But as you can see here, the RX 5700 doesn't accept ray tracing, so this is what we're checking. However, when we play with the RTX 2060 is where I was really surprised, because I was expecting to have to be more aggressive with DLSS or anything, but no, I basically keep the same DLSS balance with the medium preset plus RT shadows from the sun and from local sources, and I was still able to maintain those 60 FPS. So this means that this title is clearly better optimized for NVIDIA. So this is one of those games that, as I, you know, some games will run better with one or run better with other. The thing is, we can have ray tracing here, and maybe we can even be more aggressive, you know, put the DLSS on performance and have reflections or something like that. Or if you want to play at 30 FPS, not an issue. And this is the last game I'm going to test, and this is, well, it's just an anomaly, but it may be the first anomaly. You know, Alan Wake 2 needs mesh shader. So I tested this on the AMD RX 5700, and this is a 1080p FSR ultra performance low, and yes, we can get over 30 FPS, but man, the image, it seems like I'm looking at a retro game because it's so pixelated, it's so shimmering, that I don't think this is a very enjoyable way to play this game. And this is, as I said, a 1080p using FSR ultra performance, so it has to be something like 360p internally or worse. It's really, really low. However, when we tested with the RTX 2060, look at how much better the image is. It's amazing how much clearer and the clarity, and we are playing at 1440p DLSS performance, still keeping the low preset and still at 30 FPS, but at least the game is much better, and it's playable completely with a very good image quality from my point of view compared to what we achieve on the RX 5700, because the RTX 2060 does have mesh shader support, so that's a big difference. So you see, direct comparisons are unfair to both. So have you seen, yes, the RX 5700 is clearly faster than the RTX 2060. It's still faster, but it hasn't aged like wine. What I mean it hasn't aged like wine is that I don't feel it's now faster than it was at the beginning comparatively to the RTX 2060. I mean, the difference is still around 10 to 15%, which is still, you know, in our 50 FPS games, is the difference between 50 FPS and 60 FPS. So it's quite important. It's not a small percentage that we are talking here. So it could be a very big difference here between going from 50 to 60 FPS. Okay, we have to take that into consideration. And of course, we have seen how the 8 GB of VRAM allow us for some games to run a higher quality, because we are not constrained by the VRAM that is causing a lot of slowdown. So that is also important. However, when we test the RTX 2060, then what we found is that in some cases, that difference we can compensate by being more aggressive with DLSS. That means that we are getting closer to the performance of the RTX of the RX 5700 by being more aggressive with DLSS. And you can argue, but you could be also more aggressive with the FSR. Yes, but the point I'm trying to make is that while if you are more aggressive with the FSR, you're going to get a much worse image quality. And what I'm trying to get here is that middle point where I get good image quality, good configuration, and good performance. And the advantage that DLSS provides that RX doesn't is the fact that I can be more aggressive with DLSS and still have good image quality. Okay, so everything is trade-off at the end of the day. So if you bought an RTX 2060 at the time, you may be dealing with having to adjust more your settings to accommodate the limitation in VRAM. But if you have an RX 5700, you have more VRAM, but you can, for example, have any sort of ray tracing effects, which people say, but you can make any ray tracing effect work on a 2060, which I disagree. I think you can, and if you are not worried about playing at 30 FPS, you can get very good image quality, because we here try to achieve 60. So imagine if you only care about getting to 30, which I know some people say is not playable. I am not in that. I think you can enjoy your games at 30 FPS if you prefer image quality, okay? But that's another discussion. I'm not going to get into that. What I'm trying to get here is to the fact that the RTX 2060 allows you, for example, in some game, okay, lower some settings here or there, and then put some ray tracing effects, which will look nicer, but I have to be more aggressive with DLSS. But at the end of the day, you used to get a very good playable experience. With the RX 5700, you can up some texture, for example, but you cannot have RTX, or you have to limit yourself on how much or how aggressive you are with FSR to get to that level of playability that you're looking for. This is the better example of this is the Alan Wake game, where it's unplayable. It's completely unplayable on the RX 5700 from my point of view, but you can still play even if it's at 30 FPS, but very stable 30 FPS with very nice image quality on the RTX 2060. So as you can see, I won't say that any of the two has aged better, but I don't think that, saying that the RX 5700 was the best buy or the best choice is necessarily true either, because it depends a lot on what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to play at the time. Because while a person, interested in Alan Wake 2 who bought an RTX 2060 can still play that game today, a person with an RX 5700 cannot. So that's quite interesting to see. But of course, Alan Wake is just one game in many, but the thing is, I can activate some ray tracing reflections on SpiderMan, which I love the reflection, because obviously because of the kind of environment, the reflections give a lot of nice information, and it looks quite good. While on the RX you can, but of course you can have better frame performance. So it's a trade-off. So each one of them has the possibility, but one thing that the RTX has that the RX is not is more possibilities, because you can have many ray tracing experience, being more aggressive with DLSS, or just limiting your frame rate like to 40, for example, if you have a VRR monitor, or to 30 if you don't care about playing at 30, and even on 60 then you have to be much more aggressive. But that's my point. Each one of them offer trade-offs. So which one has aged better, I will let that decision up to you. But I think both of these cars, if you bought them, they were nice choices. But from my point of view, there is no such a thing as a better choice here, because they are both providing different things. Now, do I think that the RTX justified? Because the thing here is also the price, right? But let's remember the RTX came with mesh shader and VRS and ray tracing, DLSS, and the RX 5700 for the same price doesn't have any of these things. It's a little bit faster, and it has 2 extra gigs of VRAM. So as I said, everything is a trade-off. Which one was more worthy of your $350 at the time and has lasted longer? It will depend, of course, on how you like to play and what games you like to play. But from my point of view, they are different, and this proved my point that testing cars, if we base our decisions only on rasterization comparison, obviously the RX 5700 will have destroyed the RTX 2060. But when we take into consideration things like DLSS, FSR, ray tracing, and on those technologies, the picture is not that clear from my point of view. So that's why I don't think, traditional testing is any longer viable. It should not, and it needs to change. That's my point of view. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Which one would you think has aged better? Which one will you think will have lasted longer if you bought a release, or which one would you buy now? I'm not comparing the 2060 Super here, which has 8 gigs of VRAM, but the original 2060, because it costs the same as the RX 5700. Having said that, I hope you like this video, and as always, see you on the next one.